And welcome to folks. For folks who weren't here yesterday in our workshops, my name is Kevin Nolan. I'm one of the Canvas administrators for CSU, and I do training and support for instructors and TAs and students as they come find us. So this morning we're going to be talking about the Canvas Gradebook and assignments and how those are interrelated within Canvas. And I'm co-presenting this morning with Katie Little from Tilt, and I'm going to let Katie introduce herself.
Hey all, I'm Katie Little, and I'm the Director of Instructional Technology for Tilt, which is the Institute for Learning and Teaching here on campus.
Okay. And yesterday I had sent out to folks who had registered for the course, I sent out a number of handouts and training accounts, and we'll take a closer look at those here in just a moment. We're going to start with Katie doing a presentation on pedagogically things to consider as you're aligning assignments and assessments within your Canvas course or any course. And then at that point, we'll take a look at the different exercises and the hands-on pieces that we'll do to help lead this group through getting more comfortable and familiar with using assignments and the gradebook and Canvas. So I'm going to turn it over to Katie.
Thanks, Kevin. So just to start off, my team is a group of instructional designers who provide professional development for faculty. We help them design and develop their online, hybrid, and residential courses. During this process, we work really closely, obviously, with Kevin's team at ACNS, and we also work with CSU Online. So today I'm going to talk about some pedagogical considerations for building an online course. The one thing I'd like to say before I get started is even though I primarily work on online courses, pretty much everything that I talk about here is applicable to not only online courses, but hybrid and residential instruction courses as well. So to get started, I'm going to talk a few minutes about backward design. So traditionally, the way that courses were designed were that faculty would decide what content they wanted to cover, and then that's what they presented in their class. So backward design is just a little bit of a different way of looking at this. Typically, we start with what we want the students to be able to do, and then we consider how we'll check what they've learned. And then we next need to determine which learning activities will lead students to the desired results. And then in this model, the content comes last. So we'll finally determine the content that we want to present. So as you can see, this is a little bit different way of thinking about how you develop your course or how you design your course. Rather than letting your content drive your course, in this case, your learning objectives are driving everything in your course. So the first thing we're going to think about is what you want your learners to be able to do once they complete your course. And these are your learning objectives. Typically, they're broken down by unit or module or a week in your course, for example. So a really practical approach to writing learning objectives is to frame them as responses to phrase. On completion of Module 1, students will be able to discuss A, B, and C. Or upon the completion of Module 2, they should be able to analyze Y and Z. So you want to be really specific when you're writing your learning objectives. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this since we covered it yesterday in the session, but just remember that you want to make sure that your learning objectives are measurable. Again, I think kind of like the knee-jerk reaction in a lot of cases is to say, well, I want my students to understand this or learn this. But the words understand and learn aren't measurable. They can mean different things to different people. So just like we discussed yesterday, if you do just a really simple Google search for Bloom's taxonomy, that can help you write measurable learning objectives. So once you have your objectives in place, you want to think about your assessments. And essentially that's, checking to make sure that your students learned what you wanted them to learn, your formative and summative assessments. So essentially you want your assessments to help students be able to provide evidence that they actually met your learning objectives. And this is related to a concept that we call alignment. So we want to make sure that our assessments align to our learning objectives, because any misalignment between the objectives and then what we ask students to do on their assessments can result in a lot of confusion and frustration, not just for the students, but for us as instructors. So I think of this as a really rhythmic relationship between objectives and assessments. So just for example, if one of your objectives is that you want students to be able to discuss the role of a school social worker, but then on your assessment, you are giving students a case study and asking them to evaluate that case study in a school social work setting. That's a lot more difficult than what our objective was, right? Like we went from just discussing what the role of the school social worker was to having them evaluate a case study. So our assignment is a lot more difficult than our objective. So in that case, we would want to revisit and either revise our objective or revise our assignment so that we can achieve alignment. And then sort of the last piece in our course design puzzle is activities and learning activities and content. So remember, we need to determine which learning activities and content are going to lead our students to the desired results on their assessments and help them achieve those learning objectives that we've laid out. So essentially, your instructional activities should prepare your students for what you're going to ask them to do on their assessments. It just gives them an opportunity to practice. They are able to get feedback from you and then make adjustments before they take a larger assessment. So some examples might include, maybe practicing case studies in groups before they work on a case study on their own. Maybe writing a few short papers before they move on to writing a longer paper. You could have them doing practice quizzes with questions that are similar to what they're going to encounter on their exams. Or you can also break down a project or a paper into stages or pieces and have students kind of submit those pieces incrementally and get feedback from you so that they can make revisions before they submit that entire project as a whole. And then finally, you're going to want to determine the content you're going to present and how you're going to present it. So again, your options are pretty much unlimited. You can do videos, readings, articles, textbooks, websites. You could do guest lectures, have labs and field trips and so on. But again, the important thing to do is to keep alignment in mind. So your assessments tie back to your objectives, your instructional activities prepare students for their assessments, and then your content should map to those activities and assessments. So hopefully at this point, you can kind of see how tight the relationship is among those 4 items. So now that we've covered alignment and how to align your learning objectives with your assessments, activities, and content, I just wanted to show you a couple of course examples from some courses that I had worked on in the past. So here we have some really specific measurable objectives, and then you can note the content and activities or assessments that match up to these. So I'll just walk through these examples really quickly, but the first one was from an oceanography class, and the objective was to discuss Earth's inner structure and its origin of heat. And then the instructor aligned that objective with a short lecture and a discussion. One of the psychology classes I worked on, the objective was recognizing parts of the brain and locate given structures using appropriate anatomical terms. So this instructor had an interactive content that it would highlight parts of the brain, and then when you moused over certain pieces, like the proper anatomical term would come up, and then students had to complete a worksheet assignment based on that. And then the last one is from a creative writing class. So practice using a vivid memory to begin writing a story, and that was aligned with reading like examples of that, and then readings, and the students were able to practice that through workshops. And then I wanted to share this because I think when you design a course in this manner, you might consider including maybe like a visual map or a flow chart, kind of like the one here, specific to your course. You can include it in the course syllabus, but it just helps the students see the relationships between your course's main goals, your objectives, your assessments, and then all the way down to your activities and content. Some people call this a graphic syllabus, and I think it also really supports the concept of transparent teaching. It really helps your students gain a broader understanding of how your course is laid out, how it's organized, why you've chosen certain items or materials for your course, and how you're supporting their learning in the course. So in essence, I feel like it sort of gives them a roadmap for what they're going to learn about during the semester. So I will shift over to Kevin, and then I will be back in a little while to talk about rubrics.
Okay.
Unless there are any questions.
Yeah, thanks, Katie. Any questions for Katie on the topics that you just covered? And looks like we've got a few more folks here in the room, so good to see folks this morning. I'm going to bring up my screen here in a second and start sharing. And let's see what I want to share here real quick. And I will bring up this here. And we're going to start talking today about the gradebook and assignments. So just to double check, I had sent out copies of a couple of handouts. One is assignments and gradebook basics key points. And the other item are the gradebook basic exercises. And that's what we'll be using today as we work our way through this workshop to let you just have hands-on experience and get you accustomed to working with assignments and the gradebook in Canvas. I also sent out a list of training accounts yesterday. And if you didn't get that, I'll bring up a copy of this here. If you were in the workshop yesterday, you're welcome to use your training account from yesterday. Otherwise, you can use the one that I sent out yesterday, or that I sent out via email yesterday. I'll just bring that back up here so I can see who's in the window here. So first off, I'm going to do a little bit of introduction using a PowerPoint. And then we're going to have you log into Canvas, use your training account, make sure those are working well. And then we're going to start working our way through the exercises for this workshop. So let me bring up my gradebook PowerPoint slides here. And let's go over a few concepts related to the gradebook. So we're going to take a look at what's the relationship between assignments in the gradebook and Canvas. What is an assignment from Canvas's perspective? What are assignment groups? What are all the different options that you have when you create an assignment within Canvas? What's a differentiated assignment? We'll take a look at how to enter grades, how are calculations done within the gradebook, partial versus total score, how you can set a default grade for students in a column in the gradebook, how you could hide certain totals from students if you wanted to, and then also how you can download and export a copy of the gradebook. So that's kind of what we're going to start working on today. So let's take a look at assignments in Canvas. So when you create an assignment in Canvas and publish it, that creates a corresponding column in the gradebook in Canvas. And in Canvas, that's the only way that you can get a column in the gradebook is by creating an assignment. Other LMSs like Moodle and Blackboard and so forth, they might have ways where you can just go into the gradebook and just create a column right there. Canvas does it differently. You go under assignments and you create an assignment, and that then starts to set up the columns within your gradebook. An assignment is something for which a student's going to receive a grade. So sometimes I have some instructors come in and who have not perhaps attended my workshop, and they look and say, oh, well, read chapter 1, I'll make that an assignment. Well, from a Canvas perspective, that's probably more of a task as opposed to an assignment where they're actually going to get a grade. So in that case, if you're going to say read chapter 1, I might put that maybe as an item in a course module, or I might put that on the calendar for this particular course in Canvas, but it's not truly an assignment because they wouldn't get a grade just for reading chapter 1. So again, just remember, an assignment is anything for which you receive a grade. You can call an assignment anything you want. Paper 1, exam 2, it's a discussion, it's a homework. The title doesn't matter, but behind the scenes, Canvas categorizes those items as assignments. We can also, within assignments in Canvas, I can create groups. So I can have a group of assignments called my exams and my papers and my homework. And I could then weight those groups if I wanted to. I could say my exams are worth 35% of a student's grade. The papers are worth 25%. Homework's worth 10%. And I could also look at if I had an assignment group called homeworks, and if there were 12 homework assignments, I could also within Canvas go into that assignment group for homework and say, you know what, I want you to drop the 2 lowest scores for students, and it will automatically do that for you. So assignment groups are a nice way to be able to categorize the different assignments within the course, help students maybe track how they're doing compared to, well, I'm doing pretty well on my exams, but I haven't been turning my homework in on time, so maybe I need to pick up my game and work on my homework portion of my class. And as I say, you can also involve weighting in there if you wanted to. And I tend to teach a separate course on assignment groups in an advanced gradebook workshop. So we'll do some initial stuff here on assignment groups. And towards the end of this workshop, if people have questions, we could then take a little closer look at those if you wanted to. And this is all lovely writing, but it's got too much text. Let's jump into Canvas and take a look at how to create an assignment. So if you weren't here with us yesterday, the preferred web browsers that we see the most success with Canvas at CSU is either Firefox or Chrome. We'll work with folks who say, yeah, can I use Safari? You can, and if Safari works for you and you don't have any issues, great, use Safari. But if you were to contact us and say, boy, I can't see this button in Canvas, or I can't upload an assignment in Canvas, I'll probably ask you to switch from Safari to Firefox or Chrome, and often that clears up an issue. So folks should have received, and how about either in the chat? I should probably bring up the chat so I can actually see what anybody's saying here. Can you let me know, did anyone either not receive my handout for what our training accounts are going to be that we're going to use for today? Or again, if you were with us yesterday, you're welcome to use your training account from yesterday. But in the chat, or if you want to speak up here in the meeting, is anyone not have a training account? So far, it looks good. I'm going to judge by the crickets chirping that means folks do have a training account. So then what I'd like you to do, open either Firefox or Chrome, and you want to go to canvas.colostate.edu. If you can remember that, that will always get you to our help page and our login page. Lots of information on here for instructors and students on how to use Canvas, our announcements. And over here, you'd normally log in with your EID into Canvas. But this morning, because we're using our training accounts, I'm going to ask you, can you click on the non-credit login button? And we're going to log in with our training account. All of our training accounts begin with the word instructor. And then we each have a unique number. Mine happens to be 100. So I'm putting in instructor 100. There's no space between instructor and the number. So put in instructor, your number, and we all use the same password, which is CSU Canvas, all lowercase. And that should get you into Canvas with your training account. Let's pause here for a second. If you're having a concern getting into Canvas with your training account, could you either speak up or post something in the chat? And it looks like folks are doing okay. If you get stuck, just let us know, throw something in the chat or something, and we'll jump in and see what we need to do to help make sure that you're able to use this training account. And so once you're logged in, on your Canvas dashboard, you should see a course card for the course that's associated with your training account. Mine happens to be 100. So if you'll click on that course, and let's pop into Canvas. All right. So remember, on the left-hand side are all the different tools that you can use within Canvas. You can rearrange the order of these tools. You can choose which tools to display to your students and which ones to hide from your students. We are looking for the item on the left course menu called Assignments. So let's click on that. And it looks like something just kicked me out of here. Let's pump back in here. I probably have way too many windows open here. So I'm clicking on assignments, and now I'm also going to bring up our exercises for the gradebook. And let's start working our way through here and the different items that we're going to cover here in this workshop. So either in the chat or speaking up, can you tell me what's the only way that you can get a column in the gradebook in Canvas? All right, see if somebody's got their fingers waking up. Okay, assignment creation, great. Yep, see a couple of folks chiming in. Yep, create an assignment to get a column in the gradebook. And let's go to, I'm going to skip number 2 right now. We'll use student view here in a little bit. So here we come in. When you first come into Canvas, you should see when you click on assignments, the initial group of assignments called assignments. It's the generic bucket, if you will, or assignment group called assignments. And right now it's blank. There's nothing here. Let's look at our exercises here. We're going to look at item number 3. I want to change the name. I want this to be not just assignments. I want this to be called exams. So I've got this assignment group called assignments. If I go to the far right, almost everything in Canvas has a 3-dot menu, which lets me do something to that item in Canvas. So here I'm going to click on the 3-dot menu to the right of assignments, and I'm going to say edit. And I'm going to change the name from assignments to exams. Okay, so I did assignment, I did edit, and now I've changed the name to exams. Notice up here I have the ability to click on plus group if I wanted to create other assignment groups, like for papers and homework and so forth. But now we've kind of got our generic one right here. And let's go take a look at, we're going to just start working our way down here and look at all the possible options here. So we're going to create an assignment here. So I can either click on plus assignment here, or within this group, exams, if I were to click on the plus button here, that would tell Canvas to create the assignment right here within this particular group. So I'm going to go to exams, go to the far right, click on plus, and I'm going to get the window that's letting me start to create a new assignment. And I almost always want to see more options. So after I click on that plus button, I'm clicking on more options. And we're going to give the assignment a name. This one's going to be called exam 1. Okay. Underneath here is what's called the rich content editor. It's a box where this is where if I needed to, I could enter instruction for this assignment. You know, it's a 10-page paper and we're using these types of standards, and whether it should be single spaced or double spaced, or whether you're supposed to go view a video, or I could embed a video right here into this box if I wanted to, or maybe I attached here a file, a worksheet. I want you to download the worksheet, fill it out, and upload the worksheet to complete your assignment. So I can put my instructions in here. I'm going to start scrolling down here and let's start just picking apart what an assignment looks like and all the different options. Assignments in Canvas are based on points. So at the end of the day, you're calculating an average grade for a student. The total number of points, say 500, divided by the total number of points that the student earned, 400, and they end up with an average of like 90 or 95% or something along those lines. So I'm going to make this exam worth 100 points. It wants to know what group it goes in. Well, I only have one group right now, exams. But if I had additional groups in here, this is where I could say, oh, this one should be a homework assignment, or there should be a paper or an exam or something like that. Next, I get to say, well, how do I want to display the students? The default is they would see the points that they earned out of 100 points, but it could also set it up to be complete, incomplete. You know, they took, maybe it's just something, you went on a field trip and it's worth 1 point or 2 points. And I have to give them 1 point in the gradebook, they'd see a happy little green check mark saying they completed and earned that assignment. Where if they had not received a point, they would see kind of a sad kind of red X saying, nope, you did not complete the assignment. I can set it up if I wanted to apply a letter grade to this assignment. So again, student gets 80 out of 100, and instead of showing them an 80%, I could show them a B instead of the percentage. We don't tend to use GPA scale here or not, so I'm going to stick with points. Next item here is do not count this assignment towards the final grade. I might check this, let's say if I have a draft of a paper. Maybe I want the student to turn in a draft and I want to get them some feedback, but I don't necessarily want the draft to count towards their final grade, but I want their final version of the paper to go towards their grade. If that were the case, and if I check this box, Canvas would know not to count whatever points that I gave to the student for this particular assignment, to not figure that into the calculations for the student's grade. Let's scroll on down here and let's take a look at the submission type. No submission would be the equivalent of other, maybe they're not turning something into Canvas, maybe they're turning something in class. So that would be one option. Online means they're going to turn it into Canvas. They'll submit it to Canvas and you can see it. And ideally, that's the one that works best, if you might imagine, if you're working with Canvas, because then I can set due dates on these items, and then Canvas can track whether it was turned in by the due date or not. And I can control a window as to when perhaps I want the students to be able to turn in the assignment, and maybe when after a certain date they would not be able to turn in the assignment. So the online gives you a lot more options, if you will. On paper might be, okay, they completed it in class. You graded it manually, and you'll come in here and then eventually enter that final grade for the student in the gradebook, but it won't have been submitted in Canvas. External tool might be something if you're using a publisher tool, McGraw-Hill or Pearson. There's certain tools where I can go into Pearson, a student would go in there and they would complete their assignment in Pearson, but it can be set up so that it syncs back to Canvas. So if they were to complete, let's say, quiz 1 over in Pearson, it can send it back and it would create quiz 1 here in Canvas, and then it would populate the column in the gradebook with the points that the student had earned over in the Pearson system as opposed to here within Canvas. So that would be an example of why you might select an external tool as a submission type. In this case, we're going to just select online. I want them to turn something into Canvas. I can have them fill out a text box, which would be similar to the box we see up at the top here. I could say maybe the assignment is they need to have gone out and created their own website somewhere, and I want them to submit the URL of the web address for that particular website. I could have them do an audio recording or video recording and submit that. Student annotation we tend not to use much here at CSU. File upload is the one that's most common. I can do a file upload. I want them to submit a file. Well, that leaves it fairly broad. So I usually want to designate what kind of files I'm willing to accept, because on, let's say on a Mac might have certain software called Pages where they design their Word document and they submit it into Canvas, but I'm on a PC. I would not be able to open that students because they wouldn't have the software to open up that proprietary document creation product that appears on a Mac computer. So what I might do is here, I would probably often say, I want to restrict the file types that I'm going to accept. And in this case, maybe it would be the two common ones are the ones you can see that I've used before, docx, which is a Microsoft Word document, or a PDF file, which is a very common file type. So here I could say, I will only accept uploads, and I probably would have put this in my instructions above and would have said, hey, I want you to submit this assignment, student, but it needs to either be a Microsoft Word document or it needs to be a PDF document. And if the student tried to submit something that was not a Word doc or a PDF, they would get an error saying, nope, this is not a file type that can be submitted for this particular document. So that kind of helps at least make sure that both you and the students have the same software so that you can then actually open the student's assignment that's been submitted and be able to grade that assignment. So that's often why you might want to restrict the file upload type. And again, as we do this, try to work on my skill of monitoring the chat over here. Looks like we're doing okay. Submission attempts. The default is unlimited, which, for some folks, they might be willing to have a student submit this paper 3 or 4 times, but often they'll maybe set it limited and say, no, this is a one-shot deal. This is your final paper. I need you to turn in just one version of the paper. So often I would set this probably to 1 attempt. As we scroll down here, look at other options that are available here. We have the option, if we want, CSU has a plagiarism tool called Turnitin, and it's turned on for all courses within Canvas. And if I wanted to activate and use Turnitin with this particular assignment, it only works if it's an online submission and a file upload. And then I can say, you know what, I want to turn Turnitin on for this particular assignment. And I would turn on Turnitin. And it takes a second and it shows you all the different options that are turned on by default. And I'm not going to go through each one of these, but just know that you can go in here and tweak this a little bit here. One option that I might do here is this one real quick. Perhaps this was a draft. I could set this to do not store the submitted papers. So that way the draft would not go into the repository. And therefore, when a student, I submitted my draft into Turnitin, and I submitted my final version of my paper into Turnitin, well, those two are going to probably match very heavily from a plagiarism perspective because they're essentially very similar to the same paper. So for draft, I might say, don't put a copy into the repository. I don't want this compared to other students' papers as the draft. But then when I come in here, I could say, but I do want the final version. I do want it to go into the repository, be compared against other papers, and other papers that submitted could be compared against this particular student submission. But in general, most of the standards here for Turnitin are set. You can use those. I can say, currently, the default is students can see their similarity score, how their paper kind of scored from a plagiarism ranking point of view. They can immediately see that score. I could change that to say, hey, they get to see that score after the assignment's been graded or after the due date has passed. Or I could say they never get to see the similarity score, but this is where I can control what they see and when from a Turnitin plagiarism check. Scroll down here. A group assignment would be the idea. If I wanted to use groups, I have to actually create groups in Canvas, and that's a whole other course. But under people in a Canvas course, I could create groups, put students into groups. And once I've created those groups, I could make this a group assignment. And essentially that says if there's a group of 4 students, the students collaborate and work on that paper. And then one student on behalf of the group uploads their version of the paper. And then when I go to grade it in SpeedGrader, we'll look at that a little bit later, I would see I'm grading by group 1, group 2, group 3, as opposed to individual students. And I can grade that paper, add annotations and comments, and give it a grade. And then all the students in that group would then see all the same annotations, all the same comments, and they will have received the same grade for the assignment. So that would be how you would use a group assignment in Canvas. There's a peer review option. So if students turn in a paper, you can set it up that, after all students ideally have turned in their paper, you can then set it up so that they can then view a peer's paper and review that paper, and they can provide some comments and kind of a basic scoring of how they felt that that student had done on their version of the paper. Then as an instructor, I can go in when I go to grade that paper finally. I can see the peer review that a peer had provided. I can look at my own standards for looking at that student's work and then give an overall grade to the paper, incorporating in the peer reviewer's comments as I give the ultimate grade for that assignment for the student. Questions so far? I know we're covering a lot of stuff here and going kind of quickly. Folks doing okay? Give me a thumbs up, a yes in the chat. I don't hear any snoring, so that's a good sign. Looks like I get a couple folks saying that things are going okay, so all right. Hey, even a thumbs up, I'll take it. All right, so we've talked about group assignments, peer review, and then basically let's come to the next question. Basically, who has to do this assignment? The default is everyone in the course. And so everyone turns in the assignment with the same due date, and we'll talk about the available from and until dates here in a second. But I also, folks who were with us yesterday, we talked about the concept of cross-listing, and I'll mention that again today. In Canvas, this fall, I'm teaching History 100, and I'm teaching sections 1, 2, and 3. So I don't really want to maintain 3 separate course sites in Canvas and keep the content up to date in 3 separate sites. I could cross-list and combine those sections, and I would pick one to be the parent. I usually pick section 1, and then I would move sections 2 and 3 underneath section 1 in Canvas. So I'd have one big course cross-listed. All the students from the 3 sections are in this one course in Canvas. Well, if I did that then, and this particular course I don't have to set up, but I would see here, I could either see all my students listed here, or I could also say, hey, you know what? Section 1 meets on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So section 1's due date will be on Wednesday. Then I could go to section 2 and see, well, they meet Tuesday, Thursday. So their due date will be set on Thursday. So they're using the same assignment in Canvas, but I can give them different due dates, which makes it very flexible. I can also use this piece. Let's say I'm working with a student, maybe the student's a student athlete and they're traveling for a sporting event, and I need to allow them perhaps to take the assignment early or late. So I could set, hey, everybody in the class has to turn in their paper by September 1, but it could also designate for this one student, the student athlete, they can turn their paper on September 24th because they were traveling and they wouldn't be able to turn it in on time. Or have a student who perhaps was sick and they're needing to do makeup work. I could, open up this assignment and say, you can have a due date a little bit later in the future once you're starting to feel better. So this is what's called a differentiated assignment. Using the same assignment, but I can assign different due dates either to different sections if I combined and cross-listed, or to different students. Another way that I might use this is I'm working with a student, perhaps this is an exam and it's open for 60 minutes. But I've got some students who are working with the Student Disability Center here on campus. They have a designated and documented learning disability, and they're allowed to have 1.5 times the amount of time to finish the exam. So they will get 90 minutes. So when I set up the quiz, I can set it up, and that's on the quiz, I have a way of doing this where I can say, this student gets 90 minutes, and I can make sure that the student, if I open up a window of opportunity for people to take the exam, I can make sure that all students have at least 60 minutes, but this particular student has a window that's open 90 minutes because they get that time accommodation for their learning disability. So the differentiated assignment can be a really powerful tool when you're working with either different sections or different students who have some different needs in your class. We almost always want to put a due date on here. The due date then lets us track, especially if it's being turned in via Canvas, it then will track one, students get notifications. When they come into Canvas, they see a to-do list and it shows, hey, you've got a paper coming up, it's due this Friday at 11:59 p.m. You probably should start working on that paper. They can also set it up so they can get notifications emailed to them that would say, hey, you've got a due date coming up for this assignment, and it's a way of nudging them and keeping them on track. Indiana University, I'm not sure how much money they invested in the study and so forth, but they found out some incredibly surprising results. Students who turn their work in on time tend to receive better grades. So having a due date helps people stay on task, lets them know when their items are due, and it helps you also keep track of it within Canvas. So ideally, we would recommend that you should be using a due date for pretty much every assignment. Now, due date in and of itself, as a student, I can submit this assignment a day or two after the due date. I could still submit it into Canvas. It will be marked as late, but I could submit it. If I'm someone who I don't want you to submit your work late, it needs to be due by the due date, I can use these other two dates. I've got an available from date and an available until date. An available from date, so let's say if I set this to the 10th, that would say if a student on August 9th tried to click on this assignment, it would say, this assignment's locked. It's not available yet for you to go in and see the assignment and complete the assignment. I don't want you doing it too far in advance. So I've set in a date that I want you to, this will be time to, hey, we're finishing the week 3 module. I really don't want you turning in your week 3 work 2 weeks before that. So I could set an available from date, which says you're not allowed in until this date. And then the available until date, that's what, if let's say I don't accept late work, I can set that, and this happens to be the same as my due date. That essentially would say after August 12th at 11:59 p.m., and once it turns to August 13th at midnight, I will not accept the assignment. If the student clicked on it, it would be locked. They couldn't see the assignment and they couldn't complete the assignment. They could see that there was an assignment called paper 1, but when they clicked on it, they couldn't see the details and they would not be able to submit the assignment. So recommend ideally that you should always be using a due date unless you've got a really good reason to not, and then decide whether or not you would use available from and until dates. And again, those can be powerful ways of kind of helping students stay on track and helping you stay up to date with your grading. And I'm going to take these off here for a second because I'm not going to need those for my exam. And then remember down the bottom, I can either just save this assignment and that will create it and it'll put it, I'll be able to see it in the gradebook, but it'll be unpublished. And yesterday we talked about the concept in Canvas. This concept of publish runs through the entire your course in Canvas. For students to be able to see your course, you have to publish it. For them to see an assignment, you have to publish it. For them to see a module, you have to publish it. So almost everything you have to explicitly say, this is done and ready for students to see it. And then when it is, then I would click Save and Publish. And it will have created the assignment for me. And I see a quick summary here. Let's take a quick look here. I want to take a look at two things. First, can you, if you're following along with us, up in the top left-hand corner, well, actually, it's actually visible from here. In the top right-hand corner, do you see the Student View button? Allows me to see the course through the eyes of a student. So I can verify, can they see the assignments I've published? Can they see the content that I've made available to students? And if not, what's off and what might I have to correct? So if you can click on Student View real quick, I'll show you something else that this gains us. So I'm up in the top right corner, I'm clicking on Student View. And notice here I can see exam 1 as an assignment and I could go ahead and start the assignment as a student. So Student View is also a nice way to be able to do, you could actually go through the process of going through this assignment and actually submitting the assignment to see what that looks like from a student's perspective. We clicked on Student View at the bottom right. Can you click Leave Student View? And I'll tell you why I just did that. So I was in Student View, I'm leaving Student View here in the bottom right. And now on the left-hand course menu, let's go to Grades. Let's take a look at the Gradebook. So I come over here in the left course menu, I click on Grades. And notice, so the grade is basically like a spreadsheet. There'll be a row for every student in your course. There'll be a column then for every assignment that you create. Notice here's our exam 1. I can quickly see exam 1, and that is out of 100 points. When you click on Student View for the very first time in each course in Canvas, it also adds then at the very bottom row, it puts in a test student row. And I like this row because this is often where I might put where I can do testing of grades. What would happen if I entered the grade this way? And what happened if I gave everybody this grade for this assignment? I can use this as kind of a guinea pig to see how my grades are being calculated. This thing seems to be working correctly, and just get a look and feel for how grading looks like and how it might look to a student. Okay, So let's go back in here. We're going to create a few more assignments, and then we'll come back to the gradebook and we'll enter some grades. So let's just double check where we are with our exercises. We're still working on number 4. We've created exam 1. We're now going to go back to assignments. We can create exam 2, exam 3, and exam 4, each worth 100 points, and we give them each a due date. So you're welcome to work on your own and work ahead, or you can follow along with me. I'm going to start doing that in here, but that's the next exercise we're going to do to get you some experience creating some assignments and to give us enough columns in the gradebook so we can put in some grades. When I'm in the gradebook, by default, they try and give you as much room to view the gradebook as possible. So notice right now, I can't see the left course menu in my course. I could either hit the back button in my web browser, or I can hit the 3-bar menu up here, what many folks call the hamburger menu. I can hit this 3-bar menu here, and here's my left course menu again. And I could also have done that by clicking the back button in my browser. And I want to go back to assignments. And I'm going to create exams 2, 3, and 4. So I'm going to come over here. I'm in the exams assignment group. I'm going to click on plus. I almost always want to see more options. This is going to be exam 2. Here's my instructions. It's out of 100 points. I'm just going to leave this one now for no submission, just to save some time. So I'm not going to go through all the other options now for this one. It's assigned to everyone, and I'm going to pick a due date somewhere in the future here. And then I'm going to go ahead and click save, and purposely not click save and publish so I can show you how that might look. Back to assignments, plus to be able to create my exam 3. My instructions, still worth 100 points. Displayed as points, that still works. Leaving everything else kind of basic. Still assigning to everyone, setting a due date a little bit even farther out, somewhere in August. Pick a date and time. Save and publish. I'm going back to assignments. I'm going to create exam 4. I still like to see more options. I'm going to make a mistake here and make this 90 points instead of 100 so I can show you how I can go back and correct my mistake. I'm going to create yet another due date. And I'm going to click save. If I click back on assignments, I can see my exam group. I can see the 4 items I've put underneath here. It does give me a quick bird's eye view. Notice here for exam 2, it's got this little null symbol, which means it's not published, cannot be seen or taken by students. Compared to exam 1, where I did remember to publish, I've got the happy little green circle and white check mark. This is published and is available for students to see. So exam 2, I could come over here and I could click on this null symbol and say, nope, I want to publish exam 2. And same thing for exam 4. I can click that and say publish that one. And I also want to look here, I can see exam 1, great, 100 points, exam 2, 100 points, exam 3, 100 points, up. Exam 4, I made a mistake, I made it 90 points. So I could come back here and if I click back on exam 4, I could edit. And I could make my correction, say, nope, I made a mistake, that needs to be 100 points. I update, I click save. And I might go back to assignments. Let's see. All the others say exam space 1, exam space 2, exam 3 doesn't have a space. Let's go take a look at that. I can also edit by going over here to this 3-dot menu and selecting edit from there, or click on it and then edit. But there's a couple of different ways to get there. And this one I just wanted to correct my spelling, add a space. Maybe I needed to update my instructions. So I can go back in and edit this assignment and then save it. Back under assignments, and once again, I can see I now have 4 exam assignments created under my exam assignment group in Canvas. They're all published. Let's go take a quick look on how this might look to students now that I've got these assignments here. So I'm going to click on Student View up in the very top right. I can click on home, but then I can come back here to assignments and I can see the students can see all these assignments here. Or more than likely, I would have created modules from yesterday. And I'll just review here. I happen to be in as a student. I'm going to say leave student view. And I know not everybody was in yesterday, but yesterday we talked about the concept of creating modules as the main way that we usually recommend for consistent navigation for students as a way to access the content in your course. And I can add just about anything under a module that I want. So here I happen to have module 1. If I clicked on, again, plus to add something to this module, I have the options to add things like a quiz or a file or a page discussion. But if I click on assignment, this is where I can say, and I want, this happens to be module 1, and exam 1 belongs with module 1. So I'm going to click add item. And then I could have added a link to exam 1 into this particular module. I could rearrange the order if I wanted that up here a little bit higher after the overview or the learning objectives, wherever that might be. So that's how we can create an assignment. That's how I can add it to a module. And now I've verified through Student View that they can see and access those assignments. And how we doing, folks? We doing okay? Hopefully folks are moving along here as we're working our way through this workshop. So I'm back to looking at our exercises. We just completed item number 4. We just created those 4 different exams, each worth 100 points, and ideally we put due dates on all of our assignments. We're going to move on to item number 5, and we're going to learn how, let's see how we enter a grade for our student. And I think we're going to use our test student so we can view kind of what's happening on. So let's go back to the gradebook as the instructor. Left course menu. I'm going to grades to pop open my gradebook. Here's all my exams, 1, 2, 3, and 4. That's a good thing. In your gradebook, sometimes different things will be put in. As each item gets put in, it normally gets put in at the very right far side of your gradebook. So if I needed to, if this was out of order, I can drag these columns around. So if I had, inadvertently put these in the wrong order or something for myself, I could move this. So exam 1, exam 4, I'd put back over here. And this has no impact whatsoever on the order that students see. We'll take a look here. They see things usually in due date order or alphabetical order. But if I wanted to rearrange the gradebook so it was easier for me to grade, and there's also ways that I can, if I had different assignment groups, I could view the gradebook. Let's say if I just wanted to see all my homework at once, there's a way that I could do that. Or if I just wanted to see all the columns for my exams, I could do that. But once you put the columns in, you can rearrange them for you so they're easier to track and be in the order that you are accustomed to in terms of your grading and so forth. And let's go pick out our test student. Let's give them a grade for exam 1. And what I would do for the test student on the exam 1 column, I would click in that box and I'm going to give that student a score of 90. And notice over here, it's now doing a calculation. And I get calculated columns for any assignment groups that I've created. So notice I have one here for exams. And this is a calculated column. I can't change anything here. It's the result of calculating what I said goes into my exams assignment group. And it's currently showing 90 out of 100 is 90%. And we'll show you, we're not really going into grading schemes too much in this workshop. At the end of the workshop, if you want to take a look at grading schemes, I can do that. But it's using the default one we have in Canvas. It's turned on. So the student has a 90% grade currently and an A-. Okay. Questions on how I put a grade in and how the calculations are starting to show up here? Let's go see how this looks to our students. I've just given my test student a grade of 90 for exam 1. Let's go see how this is looking. So once again, I can't see my left course menu when I'm in the gradebook. I can either hit what's called the hamburger menu, the 3 bars up top here, or the back button. I click on that so I can see my left course menu. I'm going to go back to home. And let's go look at student view. And let's go look at grades for our student, our test student. So notice student, they see, again, they have it initially arranged by due date order. They can say, hey, I want to see it by title, which would be alphabetical. Or if you had them broken up into modules, they could see all the assignments that go in module 1, all the assignments that belong to module 2. But the initial one is due date order. So just wanted to show you, remember we talked about how we were moving the columns around in the gradebook, had no impact on what the students were seeing. It was just what you were going to see. But the student can now see for exam 1, they received a score of 90 out of 100. They can see their overall total is 90%. And up here in the top, we show them a couple of different things. The first one is a running total. Based on what you've done so far in the course and what you've received a grade for, you currently have a 90% or an A-. Okay, so let's take, I'm going to duplicate this here. I can show something real quick.
And Kevin, Maria has her hand up.
Oh, okay.
For a question.
Okay. Well,
oh, and there's also a question in the chat. Sorry.
Okay. And I don't know how to put it. There's Maria. Okay. Yeah, Maria, did you have a question?
Sure, yeah. I was wondering what if for my final grade, I told the students that 20% of this is participation in class or something like this. Do I assign do I create an assignment for this? This would be one question. The second question is on auditing. Like, what if students audit and do not get any grade?
Usually when they're auditing, it's your choice often to decide whether you grade the student or not. If they're auditing, you can, recognizing that that grade would not count towards any academic credit if they're not actually taking the course for credit. So you, in those cases, you decide are you going to be grading those students who are auditing or not. But yes, in the what you described, I would create an assignment group called participation. And then underneath there, I'd have at least one assignment, which class participation, and however you choose to track that. And then you give that student a grade, and I could weight that so that that would be 20% of their grade.
So for that one, the students wouldn't upload anything, right?
So it's back to how are you tracking participation? Somehow you have a records of a student were to challenge the grade, you would have something that said, and you participated on this date, and you whatever that is. Did they raise their hand? Were they in a group project? But how are you tracking in kind of a quantitative way that they in fact participated in the class? So how you'll probably decide how are you going to do that? Is it just that they were in attendance? Is it that they were actively participating and somehow you're doing a little checklist or a little tick that's showing yes, the student is raising their hand, or no, the student is not raising their hand? But yeah, somehow, some way you would be documenting so that you could support that grade of participation for that student in case they would come back and say, well, I disagree. I participated a lot in the course. What would you do to be able to go back and justify the participation grade that you gave for that student?
Okay, yeah, cool. So, but they don't need to upload something. An assignment works without the students' interaction.
Nope. That might be, remember under submission type, you could say that they submit nothing or something on paper. In this case, it might be they submitted nothing. And then you've got some other documentation that you have that would track why you gave that student that grade for participation.
Thank you.
Let's think here. I have a question here that says, when students upload files for an assignment, can we input grades as we grade files uploaded? Yep, I'll show you how to do that here. We're going to cover rubrics here in a little bit. And Katie, I forget, how are you doing on time, Katie, in terms of being able to do rubrics?
I'm good. I can stay.
Can you? Okay, how about I kind of started spacing here that we are doing rubrics. So
no, you're fine. No worries.
Okay. We're going to jump in here in rubrics just a second. I want to show you here, let's say I'm going to show you a recommendation that we usually have in terms of grading. Right now, and you can see my screen okay. Hopefully that's big enough for you to see. Let's pick the actual screen. So here's my student, and here they are in September. They received a 90 on exam 1. Currently, they have a 90% in my grade. Okay, now this is December 1st. The student has a 90 in exam 1. The student did not turn in or take exam 2, exam 3, or exam 4. Yet, from my grading perspective on December 1, the student looks and say, look at that, I've got an A in this class. Didn't do exam 2 or 3 or 4, but teacher says I've got an A in the class. I have nothing to worry about. So one of the things that we recommend is after each assignment, after the due date, and after you're done grading, for students who did not turn in the assignment, it's a very strong recommendation to keep your grading up to date and to keep the students mindful of what their actual grade is in the course, that you would enter a grade of 0. So notice here, the student did not do exam 2, and their grade just dropped in half from a 90% and an A. The student now realizes that out of 2 exams, I've missed half of them. And so my grade is now dropped down to an F of 45%. And if I were to go down here all the way through, I think they'd end up with like a 22%. But one of this is, one, helping keep your grades up to date in the grade book, as well as getting the students' attention. Normally, if you hadn't graded this, all they see is a dash in their grades. And that may or may not really catch their attention much compared to, wow, I just got a 0 on exam 2. I probably need to reach out and talk to the instructor about what happened there. Why didn't I take exam 2? Can I make up exam 2? So we're pretty strong advocates, unless you have a real exact reason not to be entering a grade. After you're done with an assignment, enter grades for anybody who has not completed the assignment. And you just saw I entered a grade manually of exam 2 for that student. I can also come to any column in the grade book, and by gosh, look at this as I highlight over it. There's the 3-dot menu again. There's a 3-dot menu next to everything. Here it is next to a gradebook column. If I click on these 3 dots, there's an item here that says set default grade. So I'm going to exam 3, going to set default grade. And here, this is essentially saying, for any students who did not turn in the assignment, if I put a 0 in here, and if I were to click set default grade, I jumped out here too quick, 0. And then if I clicked on set default grade, it would look down that column. And for any student who did not have a grade, it would automatically put in a grade of 0. I also have the option, maybe I've got an assignment, it was worth 5 points, and I started to go through and I gave some students 2 points and 3 points, and I realized, I didn't set this up quite the way I wanted it to and so forth. And you know what? I just want to give everybody a 5. So I could check this box that would say, hey, regardless of whatever grade they have so far, if I change that to a 5 and check this box that said set default grade, it will go down the column and give everybody a 5. In this case, I'm unchecking this and I'm saying, nope, this is for anybody. I'm done. Due date is passed. I've graded all submissions. I've entered all grades for the students who submitted. I'm going to set the default grade for anybody who did not turn it on. And it automatically entered a 0 in for all my students in exam 3 who had not turned in the assignment. And then once again, if I were to go back, I want to see my menu again, click on home. I'm going to back to student view, back to grades. And notice now the student's seeing, before they were seeing a 90%, well, now we've moved farther into the semester and they're not turning in their work. And they can see they've been graded as a 0 on exams 2 and 3, haven't gotten to exam 4 yet, but they have a grade of F. And and the bottom item here kind of shows them this score is saying, based on everything you could possibly turn into this course, of all the assignments in this course that are assigned, with any that are missing counted as a 0, this would be your grade. So this ends up being, the bottom one kind of shows an F through most of the semester for the students. The top one is that running total up based on what you've turned in so far and what's been graded. This now is your grade in the course. And at the end of the semester, these two should match, because this will take into account that they received a grade for every item in the grade book, and those grades should match for their running total, partial total, and their overall total. These should then exactly match at the end of the semester. So questions on what students are seeing in terms of grades, what these items here on the top right-hand side, and why we recommend that you're adding 0s for students who have not turned in their assignments. And with that said, this workshop usually goes an hour and a half. Checking to see, do folks need, would folks like a 5-minute break, or do you want to keep going? Could you let me know kind of in the chat if you would like a break? Could you type that in the chat for me? Otherwise, I think we'll keep going. But if someone would like a break, let me know. So could you take a moment and let me know if folks would like a break in the chat? And so far, I'm not seeing anyone advocating for breaks. I'm gonna pause here and I'm gonna turn it over to Katie so that Katie can talk about the Rubrics tool in Canvas. And then when we come back a little bit later, I'll show you how to kind of use that tool. So let me stop sharing my screen. And good of you to remember that Katie's still here, that I didn't let her walk away and say, oh, what happened to Rubrics? Oh, I forgot to talk about Rubrics. So
you can't
okay,
forget me that easily.
I know.
Kevin.
I figured you would let me know if you had to head out. So
yeah,
all right, we can see your screen.
Oh, good. Perfect. Okay. Yeah, so as Kevin mentioned, we'll just spend a couple minutes talking about rubrics and how they can be used to your advantage as you teach. So we're sort of slowly seeing rubrics catch on in higher education. I would say if you have any experience, in the K-12 setting, or if you have little kids at home, or even slightly older kids, You probably are aware that rubrics have been used in those classrooms for many years. I know I have an 11th grader and a 7th grader, and honestly, from the time that they were in kindergarten, even for just a small project, they would come home with a very simplistic rubric showing them how they were going to be graded on a certain assignment. And then, as they've kind of moved through the K through 12 system and gotten older, those rubrics have gotten more complicated. Their assignments have gotten more complicated. But rubrics can be can be beneficial to both faculty and students. So I'll just kind of start off by talking about the benefits to instructors. So they can help you reduce the time that you spend grading by allowing you to refer to, a substantive description without having to write out long comments. So on a rubric, typically the feedback is sort of already built in for you. And so you can just click that feedback for the student so that they can see it rather than having to write out a really long comment on every single item or type in a really long comment on every single item. They more clearly identify strengths and weaknesses across an entire class. And then that way you can adjust your instruction appropriately. So if you notice that, maybe most of your students scored poorly on a particular aspect of a particular assignment, noting that on the rubric, that's kind of a sign to you that, maybe you need to adjust your instruction a little bit in that area so that students can score a little bit higher next time in that area. They also ensure consistency across time and across graders. This is really helpful in some of these larger sections that we see where there are TAs teaching different sections. And this is a way to make sure that the grading stays consistent across all of those sections. Rubrics can also reduce some of the uncertainty which can accompany grading because you have this kind of like almost like a form to follow. And they can also discourage complaints about grades. This is because you and the student have specific standards that you can point to and that you have provided to your students from the very beginning so that you're both on the same page from the very time that that assignment was given. You're telling them exactly what you expect and the students can see exactly what you're expecting on an assignment. And then rubrics are also beneficial to students. So first, they have the ability to recognize the instructor's expectations and standards right from the very start. You're both on the same page. They allow them to monitor and assess their progress as they work toward clearly indicated goals. They can use instructor feedback to improve their performance. So, maybe if I was a student and maybe I scored very poorly on grammar, spelling, and punctuation on a couple of different assignments, and I could see that on the rubric, that might be a sign to me that I know, okay, I need to step it up a little bit in that area, and I need to pay more attention to that next time. And then last, they can kind of see their strengths and weaknesses and direct their efforts accordingly. So again, through your feedback, they're able to see what areas they really need to work on and where they're scoring well, and then make adjustments appropriately. So there are two basic types of rubrics, and they are holistic and analytic. Holistic rubrics include basically one scale that measures all the aspects of the assignment based on the grader's judgment. So this type of rubric is usually beneficial in that it's more simplistic and it focuses more on what the student was able to do rather than what they were not able to do. One kind of drawback of that is that it doesn't allow for very much detail and it relies more heavily on judgment. And it also doesn't allow you to weight different aspects of an assignment more heavily than others. So as I was talking about, if you have a category on your rubric for grammar, spelling, and punctuation, on a holistic rubric, you can't weight that differently than, say, how the student did with the content or their thesis statement or something like that. Analytic rubrics are kind of like a grid or a matrix, and they provide multiple criteria, and each of those criteria has their own performance level. So they're a lot more detailed. They provide much more specific insight into how a student is doing on an assessment. And they also allow you to provide much more detailed feedback to your students. These rubrics, analytic rubrics, can get pretty complex. I think there's something to be said for keeping them as clear and simple as possible, but I've seen some very complicated analytic rubrics. And I'm going to show you a couple of examples. So this is an example of a holistic rubric. As you can see, it's pretty simple. There's not a lot of detail, and again, it provides more room for you as an instructor to exercise your judgment. And then just a reminder that you can't weight different aspects of the assignment more heavily than others. So again, if a student had a great thesis statement, but then the rest of their content was not very good, you can't give them more credit for just having that better thesis statement. So typically I use this type of rubric for my smaller or shorter or lower stakes assignments, just because it is, again, a little more simplistic. And then I'll show an example of an analytic rubric. So hopefully right away you can see that this is a lot more complicated and detailed than the holistic rubric example that I showed. So each of the criteria on the left has its own performance level, and you can select that on the right. So what they did to get an excellent rating, a satisfactory rating, and so on. And again, these descriptions under excellent, satisfactory, and so on, that's much more detailed feedback, and it really lets students distinguish between where they did really well and then where they didn't perform as strongly. And they each have their own point levels too. And so analytic rubrics are usually used for larger or more detailed or complicated assignments that are worth more points. So thinking about like papers or projects or presentations, things like that. And so we just talked about this, but this is just a little table. I won't read this to you, but like I said, Kevin can share out this presentation. But this just shows you sort of a comparison between holistic and analytic rubrics, what the positives and negatives are, and when you might want to consider using each one. And then last, if you were here yesterday, I gave a little plug for the TILT website, but you might just want to pop in and take a look at the TILT website. We have a lot of tools for teaching effectiveness in online, hybrid, and residential instruction classes. We offer a lot of workshops and short courses and things like that. So you can register for professional development opportunities on there. For everything from how to plan your first 4 weeks of class to how to motivate your students. And again, much of this overlaps no matter what mode you're teaching in. So I will turn it over to Kevin, who is going to show you, he'll talk a little bit about the Canvas rubric tool and then how to actually build rubrics in Canvas, which is awesome. I love it. It's probably one of my favorite tools. It's much better than having a printed out rubric or even a rubric in Word that you have to mark up. So it really makes grading a lot easier if you use the Canvas rubric tool. And that is all I have, unless there are any questions. Okay.
Okay, thanks, Katie. And we have a copy of this, the PowerPoint that Katie has. We have a copy that posted up on our training website. I can show that to you towards the end of the workshop. So if you wanted a copy to take a look at or kind of go back through those, that'll be available to you. Was there anybody else who had a question for Katie? Okay, then I'm going to go back and share my screen. Katie, thanks as always. I don't know if you're hanging out, but
you bet.
So much for hanging out.
Thank you. Have fun, everyone.
Bye, Katie.
Bye.
I'm going to go back and share my screen yet again. Make this window open so I can see the chat. There we go. All right, folks. So we'll keep working our way here through Gradebook and assignments. I'm looking at our exercises. Let's do item number 7. We kind of did the idea of putting in zeros. And actually, while I'm right here, let me just show you real quick about how students get notified about assignments in Canvas with due dates. So here I am. I'm back in my course. I'm in student view. I can see down here it says leave student view, so I know I'm in student view. Notice here they can see to do is right here. It's listed. If when the student first came in and they looked on their dashboard here in Canvas, let's see if I've got a real, let's double check here. They would see a list under their dashboard underneath here of which exams and so forth were coming up. And also, I'll just show you real quick in my email, I have my notification set up. Notice here, this is in a different course. I get a notification from a course saying, hey, you know what, look, an assignment was created in one of my courses. Here's the assignment. It would have the due date. And if I wanted to, I could go right here and click on. It would take me right into the course so I could work on and complete that assignment. So students have a number of ways about getting notified about what's going on in their courses, especially if you're using due dates. Back into our course here. Can we go back, if you'll go under grades in your course on the left course menu, can you go ahead and change the grade for your test student? Can you give them a 90 for all their exams? Give them a 90 for exam 2 and a 90 for exam 3. and a 90 for exam 4. And by gosh, as you would predict, their overall grade is 90%, which happens to be an A- in the course. So I can see that by using my test student, I can verify my grading looks correct, the calculations look right to me. I've yet to find a mistake in Canvas in terms of their calculations, but it's reassuring to see that it's matching up the way that I want. Let's take a look here. So we've just done number 7, and we've just done number 8. We've kind of played with our zeros, but we've given them a 90 for everything and verified that the score is calculating correctly. I'm moving on the exercises list to number 10. Sometimes when I'm grading, by default, the way my course is set up, as I enter a grade into a column, the student then right away gets notified that they have a new grade, and they can see the grade for that assignment. Sometimes, though, perhaps I'm grading a paper, a midterm, or something, and I don't want some students to see their grades before other students get to see their grades. I want everybody to see their grades at the same time. So I can hide the grades in a certain column, work in that column, enter my grades, and then I can post or unhide them to the students. So let's take a look at how we would do that. I'm going to pick here on exam number 3. Here's my 3-dot menu where I can do something to this column in Canvas. I click on the 3-dot menu. If I come down here, notice I can say hide grades. So I'm going to click here and say hide grades. And this is noticing for me that I've already got 2 grades in here. So it's a little bit after the horse has left the barn, but I'm going to say, nope, go ahead. I want you to hide the grades. And it'll take a second. And notice the column now has an I with a line through it, which should indicate that these grades are hidden from students. I want to verify that that's true. So I'm going to go back again. I want to click on my 3 bars up here so I can see my left course menu. Click on home so I can get to student view. I'm going to click on student view. Back on the left, I'm clicking on grades as a student. Let's look at exam 3. Exam 3 now has, instead of them being able to see the 90 score, they see an I with a line through it. If they hover over it, it says the instructor has not posted or made the grades available yet for the student. So that's working as the way I would predict. I don't want this student to see their grade before other students. I want to do all my grading, and then I'll go back. I'm going to leave student view. I'm back, happen to be back in the gradebook, which is what I want. I'm ready for my students to see their exam 3 scores. I come to exam 3. Here's the old 3-dot menu. And now I want to post the grades. And now this is giving me an option. If it says everyone, it says, hey, any grades in this column, everybody gets to see them. And as you enter new grades, everybody will get to see them. Versus, let's say I've graded 5 students at a time. I could say, well, those 5 students, they can see the grades that I've entered. But anybody else, they're not going to be able to see as I keep working. No new grades will be posted until I come in here and explicitly say, okay, now I'm ready to release grades for other students who have received a grade. I tend to do everyone. I'll also show you over here. In the gradebook, it also, as I came out and came back in, you can see it put like a little orange dot up here in the left-hand corner, kind of verifying for this student, their grade is hidden. They can't see their grade. This student, their grade is hidden. They cannot see their grade. I'm going to back up. So real quick, I'm going to exam 3. I'm going to post the grades. I'm saying for everyone, and I'm going to click post. That will take a second. And now notice the I with the line through it is gone. I'm jumping back to home so I can get to student view. I'm going to grades. Exam 3 is now, that score is now visible to students. Okay, so that's how you can use that kind of hide and post option in your course for the occasionally when you have that need in a particular column in the gradebook. Okay, so we've added our grades in for the student. Let's take a look at, where do I want to go here? Or let's take a look at the view menu. In Canvas, I like to set, well, let me show you here. Up here in the top left, I'm in the gradebook in my course. I go to view. I've got a couple of different things here. I can set this to be, I could arrange the gradebook. Again, for me, has nothing to do with the students will see. I can set it so it's in alphabetical order, reverse alphabetical order, oldest to newest, highest, lowest, points, and so forth. So I've got a number of options how to view here. I could filter. Right now I have modules in here. If I had additional sections in here because I had cross-listed, I could then select sections and I could just view the students in section 2 and do their grading, then section 3 and do their grading if I wanted to. Let's take a look at statuses. Status is here if I'm using due dates in Canvas and students are submitting within Canvas, so it can track whether something was turned in on time or not. I can color code items that are turned in early, late, and so forth. As I look at this, I'm not sure on your screen, but to me, these are very light pastel colors. And I want colors that are going to really leap off the page. So I'm going to go ahead and change. I want to change the color of these statuses so they're a little bit more prominent for me. So notice here, I'm going to go to for missing. I've come here to missing, and here's that 3-dot menu again. I can do something to this item in Canvas. Click on 3 dots, and I've given you on your handout information on here. On the web, behind the scenes, there's coding that tells a web page to show something in a particular color or not. So in this case, I've already looked up what's called the hexadecimal code, which would tell me to present this item in red. So I'm changing this code to the one I found on the internet that says, hey, when it sees this item on the page, display it as red. So I'm going to change it so it really leaps off the page for me. And for late, same thing. I might come in here and I want to see that more as kind of a bright yellow. So I'm kind of using my stoplight here almost. So I'm going to change this one to yellow and I'm going to say apply. And those will be the two that I'll do. Then if I click done here, I'm trying to think, so now if somebody had turned something, if something was missing in here in the gradebook, it would leap off the page and it would be highlighted in red. So it would really get my attention that I need to either, do I have to grade that? Did it just not get turned in? Do I need to reach out to that student to understand why they didn't get turned in? Yellow would prompt me if something was turned in late. Do I have a grade policy that maybe late work, is it perhaps stock 10% or something along those lines? Or just lets me keep track of what a particular student is doing and why they're turning work in late or not? So this particular course, I don't have any submissions yet from students, but I like to be able to set these statuses because they can be really, really valuable. As long as you're using due dates and items are turned in within Canvas, it color codes it and makes it really leap off the page so you can kind of see in a particular column what's going on with your students and their submissions. Any questions on that one and how to do that one? I'm going to keep going, folks, and hopefully we're doing okay. Let's go to item number 12. Remember when we went into student view and looked at grades in the top right, they could see that partial grade or running total. Here's your grade based on what you've done so far and their overall total. I had some instructors who Canvas, the gradebook works really well. Its calculations work great, but it's fairly basic calculations. At the end of the day, it's the number of points the student earned divided by the total points possible in the class. I can apply weights based on assignment groups, but I have some instructors, that's not how they grade. They take their grade and they multiply it by 6 and divide by 2 and add 7. And that's going to be their student grade. So they don't like to show some of their totals in the class because it's misleading to the students because how Canvas grades is not the way that they're calculating the grade for their student. So there is a way that I can hide those totals from students, and let me show you how to do that. I'm in my course, I'm in the gradebook. I need to see my left course menu, back to the hamburger menu, 3 bars. If I go all the way down to the bottom left on my menu, I can click settings for this course. Under settings, if I start scrolling down here, we talked yesterday about the start and end dates. But for those who weren't with us yesterday, when we create courses in Canvas, we always set a start and end date. And it's usually the start date is almost always the Friday before a semester begins. So if you were to go into your fall 21 course, you would see a start date of August 20th, 2021 at 12:01 a.m., which is saying if you publish your course and the start date occurs of August 20th at 12:01 a.m., students can then get in and see the course. The end date is the last date the students are allowed to go in and access the course. We always set that for 2 to 3 weeks after the end of the semester, so students can go in and check their grades. They can check how they did on an assignment. They might download a PowerPoint or something like that. So it gives them a little time to still interact with the course after the semester is ended. If I scroll down here a little bit more, if I click on more options, there's a couple of different items down here. And notice here's where I could say hide totals from student grade summary. So if I did that and click update course details, back to home so I can see my student view in the top right. I click on grades and notice that yellow portion over here that was showing them their calculated grades is no longer showing. And underneath here, it's no longer showing a calculation here. It just shows them the scores that they received on their assignments. So for those instructors who, the way Canvas calculates grades is fairly straightforward and pretty easy and very accurate, but for some folks, it just doesn't meet their needs. They might turn off the totals here so they're not misleading their students and find a different way to post that information out to individual students based on the way that they're going to calculate the grade in their course. So I'm going to leave student view here. And let's take a quick look at rubrics. So let's go into our course. I need to see that left course menu, either hit the back button or my 3 bars. I want to go to assignments. And let's create a new assignment. And we're going to call this one paper 1. I haven't set up my assignment group, so I'm not going to worry about this. I'm going to leave it at 100 points. And it is going to be submitted online. It's going to be a file upload. I happen to have the restrict file types. We'll leave that as is. I'll put a due date on this one here. So I'm creating my paper 1, and I'm going to click Save and Publish. So notice after I create paper 1 at the bottom of the page, I get a plus rubric sign here. And let's go back. If I were to start over, I've already created paper 1, and I left for a second. If I come back here and click back on paper 1, again, I see the summary of what's going on with this assignment, and I get the plus rubric sign. So if I click plus rubric here, it opens up the rubric tool. If I've already created a rubric in any of my courses in Canvas, I can click here and say Find Rubric. And this particular person does not have any rubrics. I'm going to switch real quick to somebody else to show you this one. I'm in a different course here. If I clicked back here with paper rubric, and actually I've already started a rubric here. So that's not going to let me do what I want to do here. So here, if I said Find Rubric, it would show me every course in Canvas where I've created a rubric, and I could pull a copy of a previous rubric if I wanted to and bring that into this course. So I can constantly reuse my rubrics and not have to recreate them all the time. In this case, we're going to create a new one. So here, I've created rubric, and I'm going to say, give this a name, rubric, whatever, 4 papers. Okay. And initially, it gives us it's broken out into basically 2 columns, 2 criterion, full marks and no marks. Well, those don't meet my needs. So I'm going to adjust this one. I want to change the name of the criterion. And I do that by clicking on the little pencil icon here. It lets me edit this criterion name. So let's call this something creative like grammar. And I'll click Update Criterion, and it changed the name. And I want to add at least one more kind of rating designation here, but basically here it's basically all or nothing. So I want to add at least a middle ground. And I'm going to call this, meets basic needs. Obviously, you're going to decide what you think is most appropriate. So now I've got to meet basic needs here. Full marks, I don't know, exceeds. Date rating. This one says no marks. I'm going to hit the pencil icon. I want to change that name of that criterion that says like needs improvement. And update rating. So this is saying as I would go to grade a student, I could either give them 5 points for this item for grammar, 3 points, or 0 points. Note I can also over here, I can click this box here that says range if I need it for a criterion. And here I can say, well, exceeds needs could be anywhere between 3 and 5. So maybe I want to give the student a 4 as opposed to a 5, or a 3.5 as opposed to a 5, or something like that. So if I turn on range, I can give them marks within that range if I wanted to, as opposed to just 0, 3, or 5. So that's what happens when I check this range button. Okay. And then if I want to add the next criterion, if I click on plus criterion, what I usually try to do is for the grammar one, I want to get that set up for as much as possible for the different criterions with the wording exceeds needs, meets basic needs, or needs improvements. What's my scoring? Is, where's that at 5 points? Does that have all the criterion? And once I get one of those set the way I want them, when I go to create a new criterion, I can say, hey, for the new one, base it off of the grammar, so I don't have to go back in there and change the names again and add another column for how I'm doing ratings and so forth. I can say, hey, base this new criterion off of grammar. This one I'm going to call spelling. So now I've got a spelling criterion that's based off of the grammar one that I originally got started and created the way that I wanted. And then notice it's keeping track. I've said 5 points, 5 points. And remember, I've said this is worth 100 points. So at the end of the day, I would want to make sure that all my criterions at the end of the day have to add up to 100 points so it matches the number of points I said this particular assignment was worth. And coming down here, I'm usually checking the box that says I want to use this rubric for assignment grading. And then I would say create rubric. If I say create rubric here, it's going to give me an error saying the rubric's worth 10 points and you say the assignment's worth 100 points. You might want to go back in and change your rubric. So I'm going to jump into that other course that I have open just because I want to show you. Here's a course where I have an assignment. I created a rubric and I've had students submit to this assignment. So let's show you how I got here. In this particular course, I'm under assignments. This one happens to be called an assignment with the word rubric in it. So I'm going to search here. So I'm going to go into that assignment. And because it was something that was set up to be submitted within Canvas, I get the option to use what's called the speed grader. So when I click on speed grader, it then shows me all the student submissions for this assignment. But it's the drop down here. I get to see all my students. Students who are grayed out means they have not submitted the assignment yet. Students with an orange dot to the left of their name says they've submitted and I need to go in and grade them. So anybody I see with an orange dot, I know it's now my turn to do my work and go in and grade the student. If I had set this up where remember we talked about cross-listing courses. If I had set this up with different sections, I could go in here and say, hey, I just want to grade, let's say I want my TA to grade section 2. The TA could come in here, hit speed grader. They could say, just show section 2, and they could go down the list and just be grading the students in section 2. And I'm grading section 1. In this case, my training student 1 has turned something in. Here's the work they've turned in. In SpeedGrader, I've got all these different annotation tools up here. So I can come up here and add, a note here. Remember to use, I'm going to type this out, headings, and not bold for accessibility. Or I could come in here and I could highlight something. If I wanted to make my point here. It was not showing up as bright as I would like, but I could just do a text box, be able to create a text box here and type in another comment if I wanted. So I've got all these different tools up here that I can use for annotating this particular paper. Then over here on the right, notice it's out of 50 points, this particular assignment, and here's where I can turn on the rubric. Since I've assigned a rubric to this assignment, I can see the rubric. And then I can be looking over here and looking at the student's paper and okay, and this one, I'm using a totally different rubric, self-fulfill and so forth. But here's where I can say, okay, they did okay on this particular item. They did really well on this item and not great on this item. Okay, and it'll start scoring this rubric for me. Let's see how that went through real quick. And notice they've got 8 points here so far. And here's where I can also add some overall comments, nice work, remember to work on, you might want to pay more attention to X, Y, and Z. So I can give them kind of an overarching comment for how they did on this assignment, as well as all my more particular comments and annotations that I put over here on the left-hand side. And then if I were to click submit, okay. Then if I were to go back into the gradebook, I would see that the student in this case, they would show that they now have a score of 8. So using the rubric can make grading go, as Katie was saying. And once you kind of get into rhythm, it can help you grading go really, really fast. Now, sometimes it goes too fast. I worked with one instructor at one point who, he was in such a rhythm, he would come in and he'd go, boom, 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 save. Then he goes next to boom, 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 save. And because he was moving so quickly, the system needed like 1 or 2 or 3 seconds to actually do the save. So he would go in and grade a student and move so quickly to the next student that it wouldn't save the original comments he had given to the very first student he graded, because he wasn't allowing the system time to actually save his work on the rubric before he moved on to the next student grading. And I think I've only seen that once, but just to let you know, if you go too fast, to the point where you jump so quickly to the next student, you have to give it a second or two to allow it to save the changes that you made. But that's kind of a really quick look at when it's something submitted online. You get to see their items here in SpeedGrader. You can annotate, you can give them comments, you can use a rubric, and then I can quickly move on to the next student. Who else has turned something in? Who's got an orange dot? This one needs to be graded too, and I'd have to go in here and fill out the rubric and do my annotations and so forth here. So SpeedGrader is a really powerful tool to be able to grade online assignments. I can also use this if I have a graded discussion. It lets me go in here for discussion and look at just Kevin and see all the comments that all the posts that Kevin made to the discussion, review all of Kevin's posts, and then give Kevin a grade for how he did on that particular discussion. And if I gave a quiz built into Canvas, I would go in here through SpeedGrader. I could see their attempt. I could see how they did on every single question. I could provide them with some comments and make sure that their grade is scored correctly, especially if I had an essay question that I had to grade manually. I would come into SpeedGrader, do the manual grading, and update the student's grade to include the essay portion of their quiz. And obviously, we cover a ton of stuff in a fairly short amount of time. So we've hit a lot of different concepts here. And I'm going to do this last step, how you can export a copy of your gradebook. And then that's going to finish up the official things that we were going to discuss in today's workshop. So I'm going to go back into my training course.
Kevin, I have a question.
Absolutely.
So when you were developing the rubric, there were 3 columns, the one for exceed, meets, and needs improvement. Yep. Is it possible to add more columns, or you can only add rows to extend the criteria?
Nope. If you see here, can you see my screen okay?
Yeah.
Okay. See here, when I'm in this rubric, I see the plus symbol here.
Oh, okay.
That lets me add new columns.
Okay, great.
So I can have, numerous, I can have 5 columns if I want.
Okay, super.
And spread over, and I get to set, this happens to be 5 points. I can say, no, it's a range of 20 points. It's a range of 50 points. And it's whatever value you want that criterion to be. So yep, you could add additional columns, and I can either use all the same columns for all the criterions, or, maybe spelling and grammar are very identical, but the overall content of the paper, maybe that criterion is totally different, and it's going to have more columns. And I might even have different ratings for how I do that. So yep, it's very customizable in terms of columns and then the rows for each criterion.
Thank you.
Sure, absolutely. So let's just quickly show you how you can export a copy of the gradebook. I'm in my course. I click on grades. Under actions, I can say export. And that will take a second or two, and it will essentially prompt me to, it downloads a copy of my gradebook. Maybe I need to do some calculations in there. I just want a copy as a backup. That said, remember, this is really sensitive student data. So if you're downloading a copy of your gradebook, it should be on a computer that's fairly secure. It should not be on a computer that other members of your household have easy access, or that might actually, might have access to those grades. We wouldn't want them to get out into the wild anywhere. So if you do export a copy, just treat it very carefully and sensitively. Remember the Canvas, we didn't talk about this yesterday. We keep the courses closed to students about 3 weeks after the end of a semester. You can choose to reopen a course if you want to, but we keep courses on Canvas for 5 years. So if you did need to go back and take a look at a grade challenge, or how did I grade something back from 2 or 3 years ago, it's still there, and you can go back to an older course and be able to look at it. So in general, you probably shouldn't have to export copies that often, but the option is there. Final grade export, I'll just mention it. There is a way, if you're grading, if you recall at the end of the semester, you need to go into Aries Web, our student information system, and you need to post a grade for every student who took your course. Well, if you've got 10 students in your class, that's pretty easy. You go into Aries Web and you just fill in for 10 students. But if I've got 50 or 100 or 300 or 400 students, if I set up my gradebook correctly in Canvas, remember, we give a grade for every assignment. A student should have a grade for every single assignment in the course. If they missed one, they should have a 0. And once my gradebook is set by the end of the semester, I can click on it, final grade export, and that essentially gives me a file that's formatted in a way that I could then upload into Aries Web, and it can pre-populate those grades in Aries for me, what those letter grades, A, B, C, D, whatever that might be. But again, the final grade export by default is assigning a 0 grade to any missing assignments. So you want to make sure by the end of the semester, a student has a grade for every assignment, even if that grade is 0. But this, I'm just mentioning this, we've got a whole handout on our training website that would walk you through how you could export a copy of your gradebook in a way that you could then upload it into Aries Web and quickly populate the letter grades. That is the official end of this particular workshop. Those are all the things we said we were going to cover. Any questions on what we covered in the workshop so far? And then if not, I'm happy to hang out, afterwards for 10 or 15 minutes or whatever to see, do you have any other questions on the gradebook or anything else related to Canvas? So how about first up, if you've got any questions, if you can throw it into the chat or you're welcome to speak up. Any questions on what we covered today in the workshop? Looks like I should have built a quiz in so I could check everybody's knowledge, huh? Okay, so I'm not hearing any questions on today's workshop. If you want to put it in the chat so I could prioritize if somebody has a question. Do you have any other questions on the gradebook on anything related to Canvas? I am happy to hang out here and answer questions if people have some.
So, Kevin, I have a question.
Yeah. Hi, Fabio.
The screenshot that you have right now on Teams. So I see, for example, in the total 90% and the letter grade. What happens if I don't see that? How do I know and try to figure out how to fix my errors?
In terms of, so give me an example. Are you talking about specifically the total here?
Yeah,
Did you say, Fabiola?
when I was doing my I did journals, journals 1 through 5,
Okay.
example in my account. And then the total was 120 and it didn't show me the letter grade. So I figure I did something wrong or I haven't completed something. So how do I figure out how to solve that problem?
Okay. So normally the total here by default is usually, it's interesting that this one do this, usually it's towards the very far right of your gradebook. I can set it to be either at the very front or at the very end. So if I just need to make sure that, because I can't delete this, I can't remove it, I can hide it from my students, but you should always be able to see it. So if you're not quite sure where it's at, you can always come to go find it. Or if this is a really long gradebook, I could also, on a Mac or a PC, I could do Control F to find, and I could put total, and I can start searching, and it would highlight it for me if I was looking for that particular column here. But so I can move this to the front or the back, and I can see. And if there wasn't a letter grade here, it would mean that the grading scheme had been turned off. So we can take a quick look at grading schemes. So let's say I could not see an A- or an F here.
Right.
It would tell me the grading scheme is turned off in my course. By default, it's turned on automatically when we create a course. An instructor could turn it off, or they could change it to something else. So once again, I'm going to go to my 3 bars up here so I can get back to my settings for my course in the bottom left. And as I start scrolling down here, one of the items listed here is grading scheme.
Okay.
Okay. If I did not want my students to see a letter grade, I would uncheck this box.
Yeah.
And at the bottom, click update. And they would just see a 90%. They would not see whether that was an A- or whatever that might be in my course.
Okay.
If I do want them to see a letter grade, this is checked by default. I would click on View Edit Grading Schemes. And this one happens to be using, let's think here. Yep. So here's where I could select and turn on. So here's where if I say select another grading scheme, the default one is this one. These are all the grades that the registrar accepts at CSU. So there's no C- or D- or D+. CSU does not accept those types of grades. But this is the default one that's normally turned on in the course and broken out statistically, 96.67, and below is an A, and, so it's broken out this way. Or if I clicked here and said edit final grades, another one that we have built into the system is just a straight A, B, C, D, F.
Yeah.
90 to 100, 80, 90. And I can say, okay, I want to use this one. I would click here and say, yeah, I want to use that one as my grading scheme. Or, and again, I've got a whole handout on this one, Fabiola, but I could also come in here and say, you know what? I don't care for any of the schemes that you've set up, Kevin. I want my own. So here, once again, I'm on grading schemes. I select view edit. I say manage grading schemes, and I can create my own. My ABCs are, it's 92 and above or 95 and above. And I can come on here and I can set, where does mine break? And this one says it's 90. Maybe I want this one to be 91. And so I can set up the scheme as much as I want. And so I can create my own grading scheme. And then once I save this, if I were to copy it forward, let's say to my next spring course or next fall course, it would retain the grading scheme that I had customized and set up for my course if I wanted to. So there's one on by default that you can use, or you can change to one of the other default ones we have, or you can create your own, or you can turn it off. But yeah, if you don't see a letter grade there, it usually means that that particular box has just not been clicked.
Perfect. That answers that question. In the event that the total doesn't add up to what it needs to add up, where do I fix that?
Usually you would probably contact us and we'd kind of check with you.
Okay.
Just send an email to canvashelp@colostate.edu and we jump in with you and take a look and see. As I say, I've with the gradebook set up and assignment set up correctly in 5 or 6 years, I have never found a mistake in the calculations that Canvas does in the gradebook. So usually it's something that I have done inadvertently that is throwing off the grades, and I have to go in and check something or make sure something is right.
Super, thank you.
Okay. While folks are on the line, something I often get a question about is how do I give extra credit? The easiest way to give extra credit would be to create an assignment worth 0 points. So that way, students who do not do the assignment, they're not penalized if they choose not to do the extra credit assignment. But students who do, maybe it's a 0 point assignment, but behind the scenes, or I've communicated to my students, this extra credit assignment can be worth up to 20 points. The students who did do the assignment, well, maybe I give them a 15 out of 20, and they could get an additional 15 points added to the total points that they've earned in the course, which, may or may not kind of bump them up towards a new letter grade or something like that. So the easiest way to do an extra credit assignment is to do a 0 point assignment. And there's another way that I could set up an extra credit that I won't go into too much detail, but I can also set up extra credit if I'm using weights. My exams are 35%, my papers are 25%, and so forth. I can also set up an extra credit assignment in a way that would say, and if the student completes it, bump up their grade by 2 percentage points. So if they had an 86, they do the extra credit assignment, I can be set up so that they now would have an 88%. So there's a way to do that also. That's a little more involved, but just want you to know that that's something that can be done, and we have examples up on our help website.
Is there a way to round the final grade in Canvas?
There currently is not. It goes to, give me an example. I'm going to back up. What do you mean by round the grade?
Well, yeah, if you want to round, say someone has a 79.5.
Oh, yep. Yeah, I could come in here. We usually don't go the opposite direction, but like you're saying, let's say currently you're saying, well, 80% and above is a B or a B minus, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you have one or a few students, they're at 79.5, they're at 79.8, so they're going to get a C plus instead of that B minus or B. You could, as you get towards the end of the semester, you could come in here and manage your grading scheme. And notice here, if I'm using this grading scheme here, 80 to 90, I can come in here and edit. If this is the one, I don't know if that's the one I've selected, so I'm going to go here. So essentially, I would have this set up. I'm going to take some of these out. By default, these show grades that we don't use at CSU. But I could come in here at the end of the semester and say, remember how I said a B minus is basically like 84 to 80? I could come in here at the end of the semester and say, you know what? The lower end of this is now 79.5. I wouldn't come in here and say, remember how I said 80 and above was a B? Well, I'm changing that to 81 at the end of the semester. I would not do that, but yes, you can come in here and change that lower end of your grading scheme and say, that's 79.5. I will change and adjust so it will display, it will be a B instead of it'll be a B instead of a C minus or a C plus.
Okay.
Is that okay?
I've seen people create an assignment with 0 points called final grade. Is that, and then like just write whatever. Is that okay, or?
So now we get into how much do you want to confuse your students and how many questions do you want to answer. People who do that do not like the way the Canvas grades. So they go into Excel and they divide and add 6 points, and then they populate that column with their grades from their Excel spreadsheet because they don't like the points earned divided by points possible in the course. So that's somebody who is, again, that would be an example of somebody, they've turned out the totals. They don't like the way Canvas grades, so they're doing it their own way. So that's why they might be doing that total that way.
Thanks.
Sure. What other questions do folks have? And if nothing else, tomorrow, if you're sitting in, the workshop tomorrow is on the new quizzes tool. That will be, if you choose to use quizzes in Canvas, we have a current classic tool we've been using for the last 5 or 6 years that is going to be replaced over the course of 2021, 2022 with a new tool. So that's the course I'm teaching tomorrow, is how do you get started using the new quiz tool built into Canvas. In the afternoon, I think we've also got a session set up, which is basically like open hours or drop-in hours. So people can go into Bridge and sign up for that, which essentially is just a Teams meeting like this, where people can pop in. I'll be sitting in there, and if people have questions on anything Canvas, I'll be hanging out to be able to answer people's questions. Otherwise, remember, since I'm here, I'm going to go back to, remember our login page is at canvas.colostate.edu. Lots of handouts, lots of information up here for both instructors and students. Under support, if I were to click support, and I want to see support as an instructor, it mentions the different guides and videos. Canvas currently is the most heavily used online system in the world. It surpassed Blackboard 2 or 3 years back. So there's tons of guides out there. One by the maker of Canvas, which is a company named Instructure out of Salt Lake City. But if you do a search on Google or Bing or whatever, Canvas, how do I do X, Y, or Z, you'll find tons of videos by other instructors and students who have posted their own training information on how to use Canvas. So there's tons of information out there. Remember here, every college has a Canvas coordinator. So if you come in here and look at up your Canvas coordinator by college, it lists the name of your coordinator and how to get in touch with that coordinator. So they're a really valuable resource. If you've got questions about Canvas, you can reach out to them and see if they can provide some assistance. If for whatever reason they're out or something else and you can't get a hold of them, you're always welcome to shoot us a question. I've got a question form here, or if you just send an email to canvashelp@colostate.edu, that comes to our team of Nick and Melody and myself. We would jump in and do whatever we could do to help you get underway and be able to teach your course successfully here at CSU. So lots of different resources out there. Right now, we just say, based on the workshops you've taken, just get into your course for this fall and start playing, start getting things set up, start adding content, start building out your assignments, and just, get it the way that you want, and use that student view to make sure that things are looking correct to your students. Talk to fellow colleagues who also might be using Canvas for a number of years, who can give you their input on how they're doing certain things. So lots of resources available. So don't I've had some people say, I tried to do this for 3 hours. Don't do it for 3 hours. 10 or 15 minutes to see if you can figure it out, great. Or you want to look it up online, great. But don't spend 3 or 4 hours. Reach out to your coordinator, reach out to us. We can probably get you on your way a lot quicker than spending tons and tons of time trying to troubleshoot a particular item that's frustrating. Try something on your own for a little bit, but then reach out if you're getting stuck.
I'm sorry, I have a question about,
Sure.
We may have covered this, but how do you drop the lowest quiz?
I'll drop the lowest quiz. If I had, let me see, I wonder if I've got a course where I've got this set up. Let me see if I'm looking for one where I've got a bunch of assignments that I could show that example. Yeah, let's see here. I'm going to pick on, imagine this was a group that was called, assignments or quizzes or anything like that. You can see I've got this weighted, but if I were to come in here to an assignment group in Canvas, to the far right, if I click on the 3-dot menu, I can say edit. And now that since I have multiple assignments in here, this is where I can say drop the lowest score, or drop, the 2 lowest scores.
Okay.
And I can also set it up, let's say I've got 10 quizzes, and I'm going to drop some, but you know what? Quiz 3 was really instrumental in learning the material in this class. So I can come in here and say, but never drop the score for quiz 3, because that one really was a high stakes one, and I needed to do well on that. So I could say, of these 12 ones, here's one that I do never want you to drop for students, but otherwise I'm saying, you know, drop the 2 lowest scores or the lowest score, whatever you might want that to be. And if I click save, Canvas is really good about then calculating it. And you'll see in the gradebook, it'll color code it in a way that you'll see that for that student, you can tell that's the one that was dropped for that particular student. And in that sense, then is reducing again. Let's say that was a 10-point quiz and I dropped it. That means the total points possible for that student just dropped by 10 points. So if originally the points possible in the class was 500, if I drop that 10-point quiz, that student's total possible points now is 490. And that's what it's going to use to calculate the overall average.
Thanks.
Sure. What else? Any other questions on Gradebook or anything else related to Canvas? If not, again, feel free to reach out to coordinator. If you reach out to us, check out our help webpage, and just keep working on getting stuff ready for the fall, and just let us know if we can help. Thanks for sitting in today, folks, and hopefully we'll see you around campus here pretty soon. Bye now. I'm going to stop recording.